Have you ever thought about what it takes for a country to just completely rewrite its sense of justice? Well, that's exactly what we're diving into today. It's the incredible story of how South Africa tore down the entire legal framework of apartheid and built a brand new one from scratch. We're talking about a change that was as radical as it was absolutely necessary.
And this quote, wow, it just perfectly sets the stage, doesn't it? The old system, you see, it wasn't just a little bit flawed. No, it was the actual engine of oppression. The law was a weapon, specifically designed to divide and control. And knowing that, well, it makes the transformation that came next feel even more revolutionary.
And then in 1994, boom, everything changed. I mean, it was so dramatic. In what feels like the blink of an eye in historical terms, South Africa went from an apartheid state to a constitutional democracy. It was a complete overhaul, a genuine legal revolution.
All right, so to really get a feel for this new foundation, we first have to look at the unjust architecture it replaced. This wasn't an accident. It was a very deliberate move away from a system that was engineered for division and towards something totally new, founded on the idea of unity.
Just let that sink in for a second. We're talking about a system that marginalized 80% of the population. For the huge majority of people, the law wasn't about protection. It was something to be afraid of. The whole thing was explicitly built to prop up the white minority, turning black communities into victims of the law, not beneficiaries.
And this is where the 1996 Constitution comes in. And believe me, this was the absolute game changer. It wasn't just another piece of paper or another law. No, it became the supreme law of the land. Think about how revolutionary that is. Under apartheid, Parliament was all-powerful. It could pass any law it dreamed up. But now, for the very first time, there was a higher authority, this Constitution, built on democracy, equality, and human dignity. And every other law, even Parliament itself, had to answer to it.
Okay, but here's where things get really fascinating. South Africa didn't just copy and paste a legal model from somewhere else. Nope, it created something totally unique. Let's dive into what a mixed jurisdiction actually means. So this is the key idea right here. South Africa essentially took two of the world's major legal traditions and blended them together. It's kind of like a legal recipe. From its early Dutch settlers, it got a big dose of Roman Dutch civil law. And then from the British, it added the principles of English common law. You fuse those together, and you get this truly unique hybrid system.
And this chart does a great job of showing the difference. Think of it like this. On one side, you've got civil law. It's super structured, built on these broad, general principles, and usually all written down in a big book, a code. Then, on the other side, you have common law. That's the one that evolves case by case, building on what judges have decided in the past. And South Africa? It draws from both of these worlds. So, if the whole legal system is this big blend of traditions, you might be asking, okay, where do the judges and lawyers actually find the rules? Well, as you can probably guess, it's not as simple as opening a single book.
This chart gives us a really clear picture. You can see right away there are a whole bunch of sources feeding into the system. But look, notice that huge slice of the pie? That's the Constitution. It's the top dog, the supreme source, and every other law has to line up with it. No exceptions.
So let's break this down real quick. At the very top, like we said, is the Constitution. It's king. Under that, you have legislation, so the laws passed by Parliament. Then you've got case law. This is where judges' decisions in higher courts set a precedent for future cases. That's the whole stare decisis thing. Now that's different from the historic common law, which is that old Roman Dutch law that's kind of the bedrock of the system. And finally, you have unwritten custom and, this is so important, the now officially recognized indigenous law of black communities. Okay, so we've got all these sources of law, but who actually applies them? Well, that brings us to the structure of the courts. Let's see how it all fits together. The hierarchy here is super clear, almost like a ladder. Right at the very top, you have the Constitutional Court. Think of it as the ultimate guardian of the Constitution. One step down is the Supreme Court of Appeal, which handles the final appeals for pretty much everything else. Then you've got the provincial high courts for the more serious cases. And finally, at the ground level, you have the magistrates' courts, which handle the huge volume of day-to-day legal stuff.
Right, but this new legal framework, it's not just theory in a textbook. It has had massive real-world consequences. So let's look at a few landmark cases that really show the Constitution in action.
I mean, almost right out of the gate, the new Constitutional Court made this huge statement in a case called the State v. Makwanyane. It took on the death penalty head-on. And basing its decision squarely on the new Constitution's fundamental right to life, the court declared capital punishment unconstitutional. It was just this definitive signal that they were breaking from the brutalities of the past.
Next up, the court tackled socioeconomic rights. In the famous group boom case, it looked at the right to housing. And here's the key. The court didn't just say, yep, there's a right to housing. It actually ordered the government to create a real, comprehensive plan to make that right a reality for people. It basically made the right enforceable, gave it teeth.
And they did it again with the right to health care. In another major case, the court ordered the government to provide a critical drug to prevent mothers from passing HIV to their babies. I mean, what you're seeing in these cases is a judiciary that is actively rolling up its sleeves and working to make sure the promises of the Constitution aren't just empty words.
But you know, the journey's far from over. Transforming a system this deeply isn't something you do overnight. It's a continuous process, and there are still so many challenges.
Yeah, the work is definitely not done. The nation is still grappling with these massive, critical questions. You know, how do you make the justice system truly accessible and easy to use for every single citizen? How do you build a judiciary that actually looks like the country it serves? And the big one, how do you fight crime effectively while also respecting human rights? These aren't easy questions, and they're what South Africa is navigating every single day.
When you look at it all, the story of South Africa's legal system is this powerful reminder that law isn't some static thing carved in stone. It's a living, breathing document. It reflects the society's values, its biggest struggles, and its deepest hopes. And it really makes you think, and it forces us all to ask a much broader question. How does any nation's law reflect its own ongoing and often very difficult journey?